Well, hello, free people of the Rocky Mountain region. I'm once again joined by Natalie Menten to provide an update on Senate Bill 213. This controversial bill was recently amended to remove some of the language that upset so many local municipal leaders. Natalie, this is the last week of the 2023 legislative session, and this bill is still being debated. What can you tell us about the recent amendments and the current status of the bill?
All right, so current status is the Senate has passed this bill, so now it has to move through the House. So there is time to weigh in on this and provide comments to the legislators before they put it through over these last few days. With it being Polis's marquee bill, good chance of it going through, especially with the amendments that were made. But there's still items of concern that are in there. Specifically, we've talked before about there's certain tools that are a stick and some of them are funding mechanisms. Well, 213 is a mix of those. And I'll give an example that in a big picture, first of all, 213 has been amended to be what has been quoted as a planning document. But if you do a search on the document and just search for the word must versus shall, you're going to come up with a lot of find hits for the word must. So local governments are supposed to come back after community feedback, present a list of strategies to the state authority. And included that in the bill right now, 213, is a menu of affordability options. And the government is to pick a certain amount from the regular affordability category menu of options, and then one from long-term affordability. But that's basically to me like saying, yeah, we gave you choice, but it's a very limited amount of choice. And the more I started to dig into what are included on this list of choices, what it's basically doing is implementing Denver's regulations that they put in 2022 and the city of Boulder as another example. And I'm not sure what I would find beyond those two. Specifically, it affects the cost of developing or renovating property, and it's tied in with 213. And where somebody could focus in on that, and I think you're going to bring up a slide for me that shows these two new fees that are embedded in 213 and very well will be set in place by the local governments. One of them is a linkage fee. And I've done 3 public meetings over the last couple weeks and asked people, do you know what a linkage fee is? And generally, no, I did not get people who understand that. Those who develop property are more familiar with it. What it is in city and county of Denver and Boulder's case, there's a charge per square foot when you go to build or renovate a property. So I tried to search it out with Denver. Let's just say you want to put in, you're not a big developer, you just want to put in an addition onto your house. It applies these fees. And when you bring up, there's another slide that I gave you, it'll give an example of what these fees can range from. Boulder happens to be one of the most expensive linkage fees there is around. The fee there is $30 per square foot. So if you go to add on, say, an 800 square foot addition onto your property, or even let's say an accessory dwelling unit, whatever expands that gross square footage, you're paying that $30 per square foot there. City and County of Denver is lower than that, but it still is between roughly anywhere from maybe $1.50 per square foot up to $3 per square foot. Now, somebody may think, well, that's not going to add up that much. But what I did find in the research is the city and county of Denver is taking in, and I'm just getting it here in front of me real quick so I make sure I've got it. But in the year for their, this could be found in the city and county of Denver's budget book, they're taking in they've taken in 8 million a year before in just the last couple of years, and projected for this cycle to take in $14 million by adding on this fee to the square footage when somebody goes to enlarge their property. Boulder is less. I think they were sitting more in a just under a million. I'm sorry, no, it's a little more than that. It's about $3 million a year that the city and county of or the city of Boulder takes in from linkage fees. There's other parts of the country that add these fees on, but we're supposed to be protected by the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights here in Colorado Tabor. We've been very familiar with the legislature skirting Tabor and adding on fees. With this being embedded in Senate Bill 213, it's pretty much the same thing. So on top of that linkage fee that I described, something else popped into Senate Bill 213, and that's a vacancy fee. So what they're saying now is that you are actually causing a disservice to the community by having a vacant unit. We're going to charge a fee, which will then be used to supplement or subsidize affordable housing or attainable housing, which we talked about before, which is middle income, without even consideration, really, for all the different reasons somebody may not want to rent their property. And shouldn't you have that choice? So those are two fees that are in there. And going back to this menu of affordability, what does this mean for the average person watching? Maybe they don't live in Boulder, don't live in Denver. What this 213 is doing now is saying to the local government, you must report to us on what your strategies are and pick from this menu of options. These are items that I just described that are on those menus. So there's no guarantee that a city would choose those over some other choices, but it still exists that, to me, it's a fact that when you increase these fees on building, and especially look at more like higher units, and you're talking several $100,000, even a couple $1,000,000 added on to building more residential units, you're ultimately just the government's fee is making housing more expensive.
Wow, yeah, yeah. I mean, the whole push behind these housing bills was to create affordable housing, but of course, housing that's on the private market where somebody is expanding their property or a private property owner doing what they need to in order to make their property serve their interests, of course, are going to be penalized and their costs are going to go up. Well, the government gets more money for their schemes. Yeah, this is a total, still a power grab. I mean, still a power grab from the state government over these local communities. So how would it work with these vacancy fees, Natalie? Do you have an idea of how are they going to know that these properties are sitting empty?
I think there will be a couple ways they could be using the utility system to see if and I've seen this in government documents, I'm not just making it up, whether the utilities are being used on a rate that would be comparable to units that they know are occupied. It even goes to whether a recent municipality was talking about a distressed or vacant properties. One of the ways they could confirm that was whether there was furniture or not in the unit. So you think now of the drones that check your backyard and the view from above. Now you've got government peeking in the window to see if you've got furniture in there, so they know whether somebody lives there or not. I suppose it could even go to the United States Postal Service and knowing whether mail's being delivered there or not.
Hmm.
But the fact is, um, they haven't really crafted these rules. They're putting these in there with 213 and saying, hey, local governments, we told you we won't stick this density boot down your throat. But instead, what we're doing is taking it to a local level where we're going to give you a menu of choices. So instead of saying, well, you can have vegetarian or meat or pasta or whatever for dinner, here's this limited choice of the options that you've got to pick from, and that's it. Like specials. So I'm not sure how they're going to exactly craft these out, but what it appears to be is much like some of the other legislation we've seen go through. We, the state, aren't going to shove this law down your throat, but we're going to give a local government the authority to do it. And so, therefore, what is the level of the different rules, all these different things that may come in? I don't know.
Hmm. Interesting. It seems to me that there's a still the general theme for trying to solve this affordability issue and this housing issue in Colorado. The theme seems to be that it's just state takeover of the housing market, state getting more involved in construction, more involved in zoning, more involved on all levels, local up to the state level, in terms of how Coloradans can build their homes.
It is. And within 213, when it has language where it says one of the, again, menu options that you can choose, and I'll quote this one: preserving affordability of both regulated and unregulated housing through interventions. Gotta love the word interventions, right? Such as capital investments in property restoration or rehabilitation, local right of first refusal. We've talked about that before with House Bill 1190, which, by the way, has been laid over on the Senate floor, so people need to speak up on that. But, or programs that transition existing housing stock to regulated affordable housing. And I just, I started to write another op-ed about this, and they have just done a marvelous job with the PR program, trying to call it affordable housing. It is just now being used as a common term. But with the average person out there, I think, like with Prop 123 that passed last year and created some of these problems, that legislative problems we're seeing now, people read the word affordable housing and thought it would magically appear and that the government wasn't going to use any sticks in the process. I can see it in people's faces now when we start to talk about the different terms, like the new term of inclusionary zoning, which is mandated in Senate Bill 213 right now, so that developments have to include the development itself must include the subsidized housing component to be able to get through the process. That's still embedded within here. So while those zoning density requirements aren't in here, there's still a lot that it shouldn't even be passed. First I was, well, this is a lot better, but that's exactly what government does. They've got this, clamp around you, and they go, well, how about a little? You want to take a little breath? Yeah, let me take a little breath. And it's just wrong. So they need to go back to the drawing board. This really needs to be, the measure needs to be, with this amount of time left, it absolutely has to be killed. There's just not enough discussion time for such an important decision.
Yeah, that is a fear that these legislators, these lawmakers, with the session being scheduled to end on May 6th, are just going to rush this through. Hey, they think the amendment's going to pacify, these municipalities, these local politicians, so they might just rush it through without really understanding the full implications of what they're voting on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And laying out these terms that have been the glossy dictionary, let's call it that, words pulled from the glossy dictionary that the average person doesn't even know. Their eyes literally gloss over it going, well, it must be something really, that I really need or something. It sounds really good. Anyway, yes. So there's still concerns here.
So is it fair to say, Natalie, on some level that affordable housing is just a euphemism for government housing?
I call it government controlled and managed, taxpayer funded housing in short term subsidized. Yes. Yeah. So it's, but then 213 has the additional that the density has to be in there. And go into the bill now. Again, I was starting to write a little op-ed, but the discrimination is still in there. And I'll make sure you've got a screenshot within the bill. You can put up during this moment, but it says prioritizing water supply for those who comply with the affordable density plan that's in here. So we're talking about, for some people, that's their livelihood, but water prioritization and also transportation dollars. So there's still a lot in here that is unacceptable.
So potentially could then the state say, well, we're not going to prioritize water to your community because you're not playing our little high density housing game?
Yes, and it's plainly written in there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Infrastructure, this could mean utilities beyond just water. Um, but it states in there, unless you are complying with what we've told you, um, it takes a chance that the discrimination is there.
So Senate Bill 213 and these other housing bills are just a one step closer to a government managed society where they control our housing and everything else.
It's central planning. Exactly. Yes.
Well, I really appreciate the update, Natalie. This is the crunch time here at the end of the legislative session. Is there anything else we need to discuss?
Just that with 213, as it goes through the House, people should remember that if they go to, you can flash up the screen, but the testimony link, they can participate remotely. Not everybody can take a 3 or 4 hour period off from work, but it's quite easy to chime in with testimony on 213 as it moves through the House. That's a one thing I'd like to leave people with. We still have a chance to make a difference here. And I think we have with 1190, the right of first refusal, simply because it's been laid over daily, meaning they have delayed that decision. And I think it's because of the pressure. So we're doing
Good.
good.
Great. Yeah. I mean, people need to feel empowered and understand the power that their voice has, on some of these local issues, some of these legislative issues, standing up, speaking out, contacting your lawmaker and testifying, whether it's remotely or in person, can have a big impact.
Yes, Ken.
Well, perfect, Natalie. Well, I hope we get to talk again soon, maybe after the legislative session, maybe do a little roundup or kind of review of what we saw. That would be really cool. But please continue your great work. Thank you for everything and keep us in the loop if there's any new developments.
All right. Thank you very much.